to this, another episode of A Million Little TV Shows podcast. This is where we break down and discuss episodes of TV shows that you may not have even heard of. I believe these TV shows need a little more love, and that is what this platform is here to do. Each week we will be covering different shows from all over the globe. We'll be breaking down each episode, giving you the main highlights, and going through it bit by bit. But for now, I think it's best that we find out what's on the menu today. Hello there, and welcome back to this A Million Little TV Shows podcast. This is now episode 5 of season 7, and today, as you know, we've been going through the series of Hannibal, and unfortunately this is going to be the last episode of Hannibal until, hopefully, we get a new series, which I am still have my fingers crossed for, and really think that they should do it, because there's so much stuff, getting extra seasons. Dexter, for instance, was one, and I just think that this deserves it. I've seen interviews with Mads Mikkelsen and Hugh Dancy that basically say that this should get a 4th series. And I really, really hope they do, because I think it was such a good show and excellently acted and just all round brilliant. But before we get into it, I just want to quickly give a heads up to my Patreon. If you haven't subscribed over there, please go do it, because it would mean the absolute world to me, and I can start doing more with this podcast. I really hope that that starts to grow, because a lot of work has gone into it, and I really do enjoy watching Game of Thrones as well. So if you do, and you want to go listen to me talk about that, go over there and enjoy. However, I will be covering other series at some point soon. Ted Lasso, Harry Potter, all that kind of stuff. So, as for now, I'm just going to get into it. So, here we go. This is Hannibal, Season 3, Episodes 10 to 13, the finale. Episode 10, And the Woman Clothed in Sun. So at the end of the last episode, we saw that Dollarhide had actually called Hannibal, and we see now the other side of that exchange. We see him training himself because he's got this speech impediment to make sure that he is perfect when he speaks to Hannibal. We then see the actual rigmarole he goes through to try and get through a call without it ever being traced. And so he ends up being able to get into a building, rewire some things, and manages to make a phone call. And this is where he tells Hannibal that he is the Great Red Dragon, or is soon to be the Great Red Dragon. Giving away, obviously, the biggest clue, that he is obsessed with this William Blake picture, and it seems now that he believes he is morphing into that. Or at least it's some sort of split personality and it is taking over him. We then see that he hallucinates quite a lot of different things, including in the last episode where he hallucinated that he was actually becoming the dragon. This time he hallucinates he has a full session with Hannibal, where he actually becomes the full dragon this time. And when he does, essentially, Hannibal basks in the glory that is the Great Red Dragon. But then Francis goes back to being this kind, caring person that we saw in the last episode as well, when he actually takes Reba to the zoo. Now, it's fairly cold at this point in time, like it is right now. It's fucking freezing in Britain right now. But he takes her to the zoo. She instantly, because her senses are heightened, can smell where she is straight away. So she knows she is at the zoo. But she doesn't know why they're there. Francis tells her that one of the tigers is actually having some dental work done, and so they're going to be putting it to sleep. He tells her that he wants to surprise her and actually take her into the surgery where this tiger will be asleep or under heavy medication, and let her stroke it to give her that experience that she would have never had. She tells him as much. She tells him that she never saw a tiger previously. And now that she's blind, it's not going to be something that she's going to experience day to day. So to give her this just shows that it's a little extreme, but he's thinking, and he's thinking about her. And it just shows how good he can be. After the experience, they head back, and she stays over the night, and they sleep together. And he also lets her touch his face for the first time. And also lets her touch his cleft palate or his cleft lip, which is something that he's always been ashamed of and scared of people to see. But obviously, it's one of those things, it's right there, so it can't be missed, and he seems very ashamed of this. But she makes him feel like it doesn't matter, because it doesn't. And then she proves how much it doesn't matter to her, and they go to bed together. The next morning, however, he is once again overtaken by hallucinations, and he believes that the Great Red Dragon is out to hurt Reba. And so he runs around the house trying to find her, but she's nowhere. He sees the portrait of the Great Red Dragon and then heads back downstairs and finds her sat, waiting to go. She tells him that she has to go and she has to get back, and he offers to take her. However, I'm not sure if it was the way she was acting or just the whole situation, but she seemed tense throughout. The rest of the time she seemed very chilled out and very calm, but at this point, after the night that they've just had, she seemed a little freaked out. Now, whether that was me putting on it, I don't know. We also see that the image that he has of this red dragon is sort of taking him over. It really seems like this thing wants Reba to be his next victim. And of course, before he can do anything to her, he manages to take her home. And so due to this, he's obviously worried about what he's going to do to Reba. He heads off to the museum and goes to see the actual original copy of this piece of work. When he gets down there, he knocks out the woman who's showing him round and proceeds to eat this piece of art, because he believes that if he can destroy it, then it will stop affecting him in the way that it has been, and hopefully he can save Reba all at the same time. Hannibal, however, manages to take a call from his lawyer. This time it's his actual lawyer, but he manages to hack the phone. It seems to be one of those old rotary-style phones, and he manages to hack it so that he gets through to the operator. Once he does, he manages to reel off a number and is able to be put through. Turns out he's called Dr. Chilton's office. He speaks to a lady on reception and tells her that he needs to send out a book to Will Graham on Dr. Chilton's behalf, but since it's the weekend, he doesn't want to disturb Dr. Chilton and just figured he'd ring the office. Eventually, she gives him the address and the phone number of Will. But for now, we're unsure of why he needs this. He's obviously locked up, he can't get anywhere, and any mail that he actually sends out is pretty much looked into. So it would be pointless him having it, unless, of course, he has someone on the outside, which we now know that he does. Bedelia is now back in the States. It's 3 years on since the incident in Italy, and she is now lecturing again. And it seems that she's actually talking about how she survived what happened with her and Hannibal. Will takes one of these lectures, and afterwards they sit and talk. She begins to tell him the story of what happened with the previous patient, the one that she killed, the one that she had her hand in the throat of. It turns out that this man had suspicions about Hannibal before he was sent to Bedelia, and he starts to tell her about the therapies that Hannibal was using. For instance, the light therapy that he used on Will previously. He says that it was strange. All of a sudden, there was lights flashing in front of me, and the next thing I knew, I was in the middle of nowhere. And so we can see that Hannibal was already training someone to be in that role that Will ended up in. He also confesses that Hannibal almost made him choke on his own tongue due to these episodes that he was inducing in it. Once he asked for a new therapist, he was sent to Bedelia. Bedelia tries to defend Hannibal, but this guy Neil can see that she's already under his spell. Let's not forget, they've been friends for a long time. She was his mentor, and we can only deduce that somehow he got in her head. And now it seems that while she's talking to this Neil guy, he can see it. He can see that she is manipulated by him as well. And as soon as she starts calling him out on it, it seems that something inside him triggers. It seems that Hannibal must have hypnotized him somehow while he was under this light therapy, so that every time that he tries to confess what Hannibal has done or speaks ill of Hannibal, he starts to choke on his own tongue. And that's exactly what happens here. And then we revisit the site from previously, because this is where we find out how Bedelia ended up with her hand so far down this man's throat. because he starts to swallow his tongue and she tries to help him out. She tries to get whatever is in there out. But of course, all she does is ends up forcing her hand down this man's throat. So was she under the same influence as this man? Is that how he ended up dead? We don't know. But one thing we certainly do know is that she was never attacked by this guy, which is what has been the case all along. She claimed that she was attacked by him, but ended up with her arm covered in his blood. And the only person that would have been able to come and help her clear that up would have been Hannibal. But Delia can see what Will is trying to do, though, when it comes to going back into the FBI, being back on the case, and trying to find this red dragon. She sees that he's trying to do what he couldn't with Hannibal. He's trying to save this man. He's trying to pull him out of the darkness before he goes too far. Now, 2 killings so far, I'd say, is pretty fucking far. And that's 2 households of killings, not just 2 killings. But Will believes that he can get him out of this before he does any further damage. But after he goes to visit Hannibal, and Hannibal gives him a massive clue about who this person could be by exclaiming something about the Great Red Dragon, Will believes that maybe this man is connected to that picture. And so, while Dollarhide is actually visiting the museum, Will shows up, and he heads down to the basement as well, where this picture is stored. At this point, the picture is fully gone, and Dollarhide is still in the room. As Will and the security guard enter the room, Dollarhide sneaks in behind them into the elevator. Will catches him in the act before he can head up, and Dollarhide attacks him, throwing him across the room before heading up and out of the museum. Episode 11, and the Beast from the Sea. So after the events at the museum, Alana, Will and Jack discuss what's been going on. Will tells them that he managed to get this information from Hannibal about Dollarhide, and that he had this obsession with the Great Red Dragon. And so now they have to figure out how Hannibal has been getting information from the outside, but also how has Dollarhide been getting the information into Hannibal, because the majority of Hannibal's interactions with anything from the outside are monitored. At this particular point, however, Hannibal is having a call with Dollarhide, who tells him that Reba is in danger because the Great Red Dragon wants her. And so now he's worried about her safety at his own hand. And also with the new moon coming in the next couple of days, he knows that the Red Dragon is going to want a kill. And so he knows that time is of the essence. Hannibal tells him that she doesn't have to be the next victim, that if he finds another victim, then she can stay alive. And so he suggests that maybe the Red Dragon goes after Will Graham's family. At this point, Will is living out of a motel due to the fact that he's helping out with this FBI investigation. And so Molly and Walter are all alone. Dollarhide manages to get out there, and obviously he has the address from Hannibal. And so he heads out there and starts to scope out what's going on. And so one night while he's with Reba, he actually starts to watch some footage because Reba is blind. And he starts to watch silent footage of comings and goings at the Graham household. And so he starts to put a plan together of what he's going to do and how he's going to get his next victims. Of course, the very first sign of anything that goes on is that animals get killed, or in this case, Will's dogs get poisoned. Now, we know from Will, and it seems Molly in another episode, that they love having dogs, and they've generally got quite a few. Sometimes it looks to be around about a dozen. So Dollarhide would have to poison all of the dogs. All the dogs are then taken to the vet, and Molly tries to get them looked after. It turns out that it may be due to food intake. And so she doesn't want to say anything to Will because Will generally makes the food himself, whereas she hasn't had time and has just given them normal food. So where he would know what is being put in it, and therefore what would have poisoned the dogs, she doesn't know any of this. So she doesn't want to confess anything to Will, which would have been a red flag straight away to Will. He would have known that his dogs being poisoned was a bad sign, and that he would have come home or sent FBI to go and get them. But also, just as they leave the vets, there is actually an FBI sign on the wall that states about pet mutilations. And if there's anything that's happened in the area, that they need to start contacting the FBI. So there are two massive signs here for them to actually pick up on. But they pick up on neither because Will can't discuss the case, but they don't want to tell Will. And also, the FBI is putting warnings out about pets. And so when Will visits Hannibal, because he knows that Francis has contacted him, Hannibal is basically telling him the plan. And Will just will not listen whatsoever. He literally says things like, "I'm not killing them, you are. They're not my family, Will." And it's so frustrating to watch this man be so smart and so stupid all at the same time, because it's obvious who Hannibal is going to target if Will believes that Hannibal has sent Dollarhide for a target, but Will just doesn't want to see it. Dollarhide goes after Molly and Walter, but thankfully, due to creaky floorboards in this old house that they've got, Molly wakes up, gets Walter to safety, and then heads to safety herself. And they narrowly escape, driving off in a vehicle of a man who ends up getting shot in the head. But they manage to get out of there and get to safety. When Will manages to catch up with them, they're obviously at the hospital, and Jack is already there. Molly's been shot, but Walter is fine, apart from, obviously, shock and the fact that his mother's been shot. He confronts Will about an article that Freddie Lowndes had written, because it's the same one that Francis Dollarhide saw. And so now they all know that they're not safe. Alana and Jack go to see Hannibal, and in an odd turn of events, they basically tell him their plan. They know that Dollarhide has been contacting Lecter, and so they tell him that next time he calls, we're going to monitor the call, so they can go after him and catch him. The only issue there is telling him the plan backfires, because of course it does. Dollarhide, however, has gone off the deep end, and he starts fighting with this hallucination of himself as the Red Dragon. He beats himself up and eventually knows that he can't keep Reba safe. He goes down to where she works and he tells her that they have to end it. He can't articulate why he has to end it, but he ends it anyway. And it's all due to the fact that he just wants to keep her safe. So the humanity in him that has found this woman is shining through, but it seems like it's not going to be enough. He leaves her devastated when he can't articulate what he wanted to do. And then he goes over to Hannibal's, as in where Hannibal used to live. And from there, he calls Hannibal in his cell. During the conversation, Hannibal listens a lot to what Francis has to say, but eventually, as he sees a glimmer of hope in Jack's eyes of potentially where this man is and whether they can catch him, he tells them they are listening and hangs up the phone. Of course, Jack and Alana are fucking pissed off at this. And before anyone can be dispatched out to where Dollarhide is, he flees. They obviously sweep the room and begin to find fingerprints and all sorts of stuff. They found fingerprints before from Dollarhide, one on an eye, one on the plastic sheeting that was covering the artwork that he ate, and now more in and around Hannibal's office. And so Alana gets pissed off with the fact that he's just playing games. And so she takes everything that he has in his room, the luxuries that he has. She takes every single one of them, including his toilet, because she warned him before to not fuck her around. Otherwise, she would take everything from him. And now he's just keeping on playing games. After Molly awakes from surgery, she speaks to Will and she gets angry at him because Walter could have been injured. Thankfully he wasn't, but he could have been, and this isn't something that she signed on for. She hopes one day that they can go home, but she knows that Will has to stay and catch this guy, especially now, because it wouldn't matter if he stopped. He can't stop, because if he did, Dollarhide would still come after him. Will goes to see Hannibal and tells him that he's sick of these crazy sons of bitches that are constantly stalking his life. But Hannibal confesses everything. He tells him exactly what happened. He tells him that he gave him the information, that he essentially set him on Molly and the family. They continue to discuss Dollarhide, and Hannibal gives out a clue about whether Will wants to change. And the way that he says it seems like that in his own mind, Dollarhide isn't killing his victims, he's changing them. And so now Will has to try and hunt down where Dollarhide's going to strike next. And obviously, the trail will go cold for a long time. until the new moon. Episode 12. The number of the beast is 666. So once again, we see that Will is really getting into this world again. He is now starting to have visions of himself murdering his own family in a way that Dolarhyde would have done. And he's telling all this to Bedelia because it seems that now she is his therapist, which is a strange way to actually go about this. Why would you have the therapist for a man that you don't even trust anymore? And can you really trust her judgment since she was so affected by him as well? I suppose it's a trauma bonding thing, but it does seem a little weird while I'm thinking about it right now. Bedelia, however, tells him that essentially he has waited these last 3 years while you have cultivated this family for him to take, because essentially this has been a plan all along. He couldn't predict the way that it was going to go, but once he's found out that Will has this family, he's made sure that he can take it away whenever he wants to. And so when Will asks what he's going to take from Bedelia, she tells him he's said all along that he will eat me, and that is what he wants. But the position he is in right now, he hasn't got a chance. But that's not to say that he won't escape in the future. For instance, if we've seen the Silence of the Lambs films, we know that he does. He escapes in that. So there's every chance that he could. Will decides to ask Bedelia whether Hannibal is in love with him, because the relationship between the two of them has been so close for so long that it would stand to reason that there was some sort of connection there between the two of them. Bedelia states that he is, but then asks Will whether he is in love with Hannibal. And again, through a sort of trauma bonding or through a sort of Stockholm syndrome, I suppose, he may be. They've been so close and so intimate for so long that it is like a toxic relationship. And so now that they are trying to find Dolarhyde and get him to come out of hiding, Alana, Will and Jack come up with a plan. And that plan is to essentially goad him, very much like with Lecter. Whenever he felt like he wasn't the smartest person in the room, he would try and prove it. And so they decide to appeal to this side of Dolarhyde by essentially making him feel small. They bring in Freddie Lowndes and they also bring in Dr. Chilton. Will has decided to be the bait throughout, but when they decided that they needed someone with a bit more reputation, Alana said that she wouldn't do it because she believes that they need someone who's a bit of an idiot to actually take up this mantle. And of course, Dr. Chilton will pretty much do anything for a quick buck. And that is oddly spelt B-U-C-K, but also B-O-O-K, because he will. He's pitching a new book right there and then to Hannibal. Alana speaks to him, and they bring in Freddie Lowndes because they know that they can't really go to any proper media about this, but this new media, this website that Freddie Lowndes has, these supplement magazines that she puts out, will be ideal for this kind of thing. They know that from previous, Dolarhyde has read things about both Hannibal and Will in Tattle Crime, so they know that Freddie Lowndes is a source for this guy. So why not try and lure him out? So Will and Chilton speak to Freddie Lowndes, and throughout this interview they are berating Dolarhyde. Chilton essentially sugarcoats everything that he says, whereas Will just comes out with awful statements. But again, they are to goad him out. He's saying things like that he's impotent and that he is ugly, whereas Chilton is being a bit more diplomatic about everything. They then take photos, and the one that is published shows where they actually are and where Will's hiding place is. And they decide that once Chilton is finished with, they can just put some security on him for the next couple of days. But they have Will surrounded by a SWAT team to make sure that any movement he takes, they're on it and they can find Dolarhyde quickly. However, he doesn't go for Will. He goes after Chilton, headshots the 2 security guards with him, and takes him. When Chilton eventually wakes up, he's superglued to a chair, and Dolarhyde begins to taunt him. However, partway through, Reba turns up, He threatens him and tells him that if he says anything, he will kill this woman. Dolarhyde invites her in, and Chilton sits there saying absolutely nothing. It seems like she picks up on a scent of something. Obviously, like I've said, her senses are heightened, but she says nothing, and she leaves Dolarhyde. But now Chilton has more information about Dolarhyde than he would have wanted to let get out. Dolarhyde then begins to terrify Chilton. He starts showing him slideshows of the work that he's done, including the 2 killings, but also some of the paintings. For instance, the Red Dragon. He shows him that he is transformed into this being, and Chilton tells him that he doesn't want to die, not in the way that they have or at all. And so Dolarhyde tells him that all you have to do is tell people that you were lying before. And so Dolarhyde records him essentially saying that the dragon is powerful and the dragon is real, and he states that he is terrified of the dragon. Dolarhyde then decides to take a trophy for Hannibal to have. He puts in his fake dentures, walks over to Chilton, and bites both his lips off. This show has some fucking gruesome scenes, and that is probably one of the worst. He wraps them up and he sends them in to Hannibal. They end up going through any scanners that they have at the hospital because they're not looking for human flesh. And when Alana Bloom delivers them to Hannibal, she has him open the package in front of her. She obviously sees what they are straight away, but before they can get Hannibal away from them, he eats one of them. Eventually Jack turns up and they begin to investigate what the hell's gone on and where Chilton is. They know that his security's been killed, but they have no idea actually where he is. Will, Alana and Jack watch the footage from the video that Dolarhyde sent in. And then we see a very similar scene to the one we saw previously with Freddie Lowndes, where they tried to trick Hannibal. And they lured him out by showing him that Freddie Lowndes was dead, that they set her on fire. We then see Dr. Chilton being set on fire and being pushed towards a fountain. He's still alive, we can still hear the screams before he falls in the water. The next time we see him, he's in hospital. Both Will and Jack go and visit him, and he is obviously an absolute state. He looks like barbecued meat. But when questioned, he tells Will that he saw a blind black woman, and Jack says Reba, because Dolarhyde had already stated this name on the phone call that they were listening in on. And so now they have a good chunk of information about this Reba character. But we see that she's not going to be going anywhere for questioning, because right at the end of the episode, Dolarhyde kidnaps her and takes her back to his place. He then tells her his true character, and it would seem now that he has fully embraced the Great Red Dragon. And finally, episode 13, The Wrath of the Lamb. So now that Dolarhyde has Reba in his house, he decides that he doesn't want to hurt her, but he also can't let her go. He doesn't want to watch her die, but she's going to have to. And so he takes her downstairs and he shows her where he's keeping his key. Basically, he keeps it on a chain around his neck. They then head back up to the bedroom and he takes out gasoline and starts pouring it around. Obviously, gasoline has a very distinctive smell and Reba has incredible senses. She can smell the petrol and she knows what's going to happen next. She hears the match strike and the flames start to engulf the room. At this point, Dolarhyde admits that he can't watch her die. And just when you think that he's going to shoot her, he doesn't. He shoots himself in the face and knows that Reba is going to have to search for the body to find this key. She does, she escapes, and she is taken to hospital, where she is met by Will. Will talks to her through everything, and you see similarities between the two, because she attracts these kind of people, but so does Will. After leaving the hospital, he goes back to his hotel room. However, once he gets inside, he's attacked by Dolarhyde. Eventually, Will wakes up in the corner, and Dolarhyde hasn't killed him yet. He speaks to Dolarhyde for a while, and they establish a connection. And the connection is that actually the person that's lied to them all along is Hannibal. And the person that Dolarhyde should really kill would be Hannibal. And so Will convinces Dolarhyde that he will lead him to meet Hannibal. And so now he and Jack have to come up with a plan. Obviously, Jack's team deduce that this man isn't Dolarhyde. They find evidence in the house that it isn't Dolarhyde at all, and is just a man who went missing a few days earlier. But knowing that a blind woman would have to search for the body, it made sense that they wouldn't be looking for Dolarhyde. Although, how quickly he comes back out of this situation, it's not like he went into hiding. So putting Reba in that situation wouldn't have mattered anyway. All he had to do was find and attack Will. But while suggesting ways of actually capturing Dolarhyde, Will suggested to Jack that maybe they should use Hannibal as bait. Have him fake a prison break, and that way Dolarhyde will find him and they will be able to track Hannibal and find out where he is and take them both out. They put the request to Hannibal and he accepts, but only on the proviso that Will asks him to do this. And so Will appeals to him and does exactly that. However, Jack, Will and Alana have already decided the fate of Hannibal. They will use him as bait until Dolarhyde finds him. They will kill Dolarhyde and then they will kill Hannibal. That way, everyone in this situation is finished with. Will goes to speak to Bedelia and tells her the plan. She tells him that this is stupid and that it isn't well thought out. He's Hannibal after all. He'll get free. And Will states to her that he isn't planning on recapturing Hannibal. He doesn't let her know whether it's going to be execution style or he's just going to let him have his freedom, but we know from what Jack and Alana have said that that's going to be the case. But as they get the plan going, Dolarhyde is already smart to it. He drives up alongside the convoy, takes out the drivers, and then lets Will and Hannibal escape. They follow Dolarhyde, and Will and Hannibal end up at a place where Hannibal has been previously. He was there with Miriam Lass, and he was there with Abigail Hobbs, and now he's finally there with Will. As they begin to wait for Dolarhyde to turn up, they decide to share a drink, but before they can actually do so, Hannibal is shot in the gut and begins to bleed out. As Dolarhyde walks in, Will is just stood watching the whole event going on. He thinks that he's going to get away with this scot-free until Dolarhyde puts a knife in his face. Dolarhyde then throws him outside and they begin to struggle. Hannibal gets to his feet and they continue to struggle, all three of them fighting 2-on-1. Eventually Hannibal and Will manage to work together and Will cuts open Dolarhyde's stomach the way that Hannibal did to him, and Hannibal bites open his throat and Dolarhyde falls to the floor. And so, after all this time of Hannibal trying to get Will to kill someone, it takes the two of them being together to finally get Will to end someone. Both wounded and bleeding out, Will and Hannibal head towards the edge of the cliff. They stand in the moonlight, embracing each other, and showing that love that they spoke about in the previous episode for each other. But Will knows that he can't let Hannibal go, and so he sacrifices himself and he throws both he and Hannibal off a cliff into the sea. As the episode wraps up, we see Bedelia sat at a dinner table. As it pans across the dinner table, we see that there is a fully prepared leg on the table, wrapped very much in the way that Hannibal did when it was Abel Gideon. The camera then heads under the table and we see that it is indeed Bedelia's leg that is prepared and on the table. She is waiting for Hannibal. She is waiting for him to come and eat her. And that's it. I'm sad to say that it's done, but it's done. And it was excellent. It was everything that I remembered and more. It was so good watching these last 39 episodes. It is fucking brilliant, and if you haven't watched it already, go and watch it. It's so good. But I would have changed it. It is really good, but I would have changed it. And I said from the beginning I would tell you how I would have done this to have it as a 4th season. So what I would have done is I would have extended the bit out in Europe when they were heading through France and heading to Italy, and then the bit in Lithuania and all that. I would have done a bit more with that. I would have brought in Hannibal's sister to actually show what it was like as a child. I think around about that time, though, they were bringing out Hannibal Rising as well, so I think it may have clashed. But I would have done that. I would have shown everything around that background. why he was the way that he was, what happened to him, why he had the guy locked up in the castle in Lithuania, how he met Chio, and then I would have had Chio meet Will, and then them come back through Europe together. And then if she pushed him off the train, as we saw that she did, explain how he got back to Italy. It felt way too rushed. Just that whole segment. Have more tension built up. Have more kills built up as well. And then at the end of that season, have it so that he turns up in the back of that truck. And you have Mason Verger basically saying, "Hello, Dr. Lecter. Welcome to this farm." And then you end it there. And then you have the tension of, shit, what's going to happen? You then bring it back for the 4th season and you play it out as you have done here. But you extend the whole thing. You have maybe Dolarhyde killing more people. It's probably not accurate to the books, but yeah, I would have preferred that. Have it show how Hannibal wasn't coping without seeing Will for 3 years. Don't just go 3 years later. Have it as a progression over a certain amount of time. Show it. Maybe show how Will was coping without life in the FBI. And then right at the end. And then have this bit with Dolarhyde, the fight, everything, round about episode 9, maybe. And then have the last 4 episodes where we see that Will is found. They hunt Hannibal down. They put him in prison. And the last clear shot of the episode is we hear footsteps walking down the corridor. Hannibal stands in his cell with his hands behind his back, and when a young woman comes to his cell, he just says, "Hello, Clarice," and that's it. End it there. That's how I'd have done it. But again, I'm not a producer, I'm not a writer, I'm not a director, so fuck cares what I say. But that's how I would have done it. But I loved it anyway. It was so good. The acting's brilliant. The set design is amazing. The fucking food that they bring onto it is stunning. Bedelia's leg at the end. Okay, it's Gillian Anderson's leg, but we'll discount that for now. Looked delicious. The amount that they did to Frederick Chilton as well really made me laugh, more than it probably should have. It seemed that every season he ends up in a situation where he gets hurt so badly. Obviously in the first season, he ends up getting some of his organs taken out, while Hannibal and Freddy are literally watching over him. In Season 2, he ends up getting shot in the face by Miriam Lass because she believes that he was the Chesapeake Ripper. And in Season 3, he ends up getting burnt alive and his lips bitten off. The man really went through the fucking ringer. And he still ends up as obviously in storyline, the director or the administrator at the Baltimore hospital. It's insane, but it was so well done. Mads Mikkelsen was great. Hugh Dancy was great. I loved it. It is one of my favourite shows of all time. It is phenomenal. The sound design, they didn't even play a song throughout the show right up until the end. When they played a song, so you knew it was different, you knew it was significant. So yeah, I'm sad to see it's gone. I'm happy I watched it again. And I hope there is another season. I really do. I hope they do pretty much what I said there, that they just end up hunting Lecter down and he does more and more diabolical things. Eventually they find him, they lock him up, and at the end, Clarice walks down. And if it's Clarice from the TV show that I'm going to watch probably next season, that'd be great. It'd really tie everything up. But anyway, I'm done. So I want to thank you guys for listening to this. Next episode, it is going to be Ginny and Georgia, the end of that. And I saw an interview the other day from Brienne Howie, basically saying how they were well on their way with it. So hopefully, fingers crossed, that will be here soon for season 3. So I'm done. Thank you for today. Thank you for listening. I hope you're all doing well out there. And until next time, I will speak to you soon. Bye. And that is it for now, amigos. And yes, I am as angry as you are at me for that sentence, but I hope you enjoyed the show and had some fun along the way. It means a lot that you are listening and supporting me. This is an independent podcast after all, and doesn't get a lot of backing. So it's great to know that you're out there, you're listening, and if you want to come talk to me on any of the platforms I'm on, just come say hi. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Twitter, and I'm even a little bit on TikTok. I don't post that much, but I'm on there. And you can also drop comments in the comment sections on any of the platforms: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, wherever you get your podcasts from. But as always, thank you for your time, and I will speak to you soon.